I'm going to mediate between Jordan, what you've been saying, and what John offered, and I do tend to agree with John. I was trying to make some concessions toward the possibility that you can best energize people by somehow co-opting this fervor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's probably an open question: how much can you engage people without the trappings of religion or pseudo-religion? Can you engender a problem-solving mindset as opposed to a struggle mindset?
That's right.
And before we write people off and saying, no, they can't, no one likes solving problems, it's too boring, it doesn't get the heart pounding, they've got to wear colored shirts, they've got to salute something, they've got to bow down. We have, we did eliminate smallpox. We've drastically reduced the amount of warfare, partly because of John and Yoko and Peter, Paul and Mary, but also because of much more practical treaties and organizations. We've drastically reduced extreme poverty, not because of the teachings of the Hebrew prophets or Jesus, but because of China and Indonesia and India adopting capitalism to tie into the theme of John's impending book. So there is a tendency, there's a vulnerability in people to want to belong to transcendent movements involving some kind of conflict. On the other hand, we haven't done so bad at combating disease and poverty and war with a more technocratic problem-solving mindset. So maybe Jonathan's right that we ought to just minimize these dangerous passions and treat more things as problems to be solved.
Well, my concern, I agree with your description of what came before, but my concern is that the universe is different after 2012 than it was before 2009, that the fundamental nature of society was rewired by everyone going on to social media, especially Facebook and Twitter, but all the other platforms as well. And so whatever was possible, whatever the arrangements were before, some of that is still valid today, but a lot of it isn't, and we often don't know what parts. And so whether you're talking about how we mobilize to solve problems, so just to take one example, activist movements generally had adults in them. They had adults, and then young people would come into them as well. And there were multiple generations of knowledge about how things work and how they want to change. But now that everyone is connected to everyone, and if things go at many times the speed, I think you can have a groundswell for a reform of a system that gets pushed through within days or weeks, just by people with very little input from adults. And that's why I think we see over and over again demands, just speaking from the area I know best on campus, demands at dozens and hundreds of schools year after year for things that make race relations and inclusion and diversity worse. So I'm just concerned, and this is just one little example, but in so many ways, I think the 2010s were weird because life after 2012 is just fundamentally different from life before 2009.
Well, do you think? Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, although I see that happening, and there has been a change toward intolerance and struggle as opposed to problem solving in the last few years. On the other hand, the demands are being accepted by baby boomers, by the deans and the provosts. And if you rewind the tape back to when we were college students, there was an awful lot of inanity and extremism and repression of speech. E.O. Wilson and Dick Herrnstein and Tom Bouchard and many others were canceled. There were posters. I have one from 1984, a talk for E.O. Wilson, Bring Noisemakers. And now the student activists of when we were students are now the deans and the provosts who are happily ratifying these extreme demands. At the same time, and we all know this from our students, this is not a uniformly woke generation. There are an awful lot of students who are intimidated into silence, and they think, gee, I must be the only sane person. Everyone else is crazy. And an awful lot of people are all thinking that. So I do agree that there is a problem of just mature judgment, but it isn't completely a cohort effect. A lot of inanity in our generation.
But that's my point, is that it's not a cohort effect. It's a change in dynamics. So it used to be that there would be some activists, but other people could still have a conversation, or they could still have they could still play a role. You're right that the people giving into the demands are people from the previous generation who were at least that generation earlier, but they're not happily giving in. I've spoken to many leaders in the academic world. They all hate it. They feel stuck. They feel pressured. They don't know what to do. And now it's the same thing, people leading nonprofits, especially progressive nonprofits or companies. So it's not that young people are woke, it's that the dynamics have changed so that the woke among the young now have such power to intimidate others into silence. And this is what we see in universities, that students are not afraid of their professors, they're afraid of a subset of students. And the professors are not afraid of anyone except this subset of students. And the presidents, well, they have donors and other people to please, but the dynamics of social media allows a small group to weaponize their moralism and to intimidate others into silence. And this is happening in so many institutions, not everywhere, but it is happening. And so what we need to do is not change a generation. What we need to do is change the dynamics so that bad ideas don't dominate and intimidate.